Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is emphatic when he went on television recently on Sky News and said that he will definitely not trade away peace or land for peace. Well, I mean, but he kind of said he would, but then he really wouldn't. And well, you see, it's a little difficult to even to explain exactly what he was saying in the context of the very same interview. But as we're going to see in today's episode, the things that he says in that interview, and there only a few clips have been shown in most of the mainstream media. We're going to get into a little bit more depth of it today because you can see in some very key areas, he's admitting that he doesn't have the capacity to continue waging war, and the only alternative left is some kind of a negotiated settlement at an early date. And we'll see what the Trump administration does on that. But as we're also going to see, there's some red flags even at that. And to help break us down on this, we have a really good guest on today, back again, Andrei Martyanov, who's an author and military expert and has a YouTube channel at Smoothie X12. Welcome back to the show, first of all.
My pleasure, Colonel. My pleasure.
And listen, you got one of the reasons we love to have you on here is because you have a perspective that not a lot of people in the West have, and you have some contacts on the Russian side that unfortunately is ignored on most of the West. So it's hard to get an accurate picture unless you're willing to look at all sides of things, and that's where we're really grateful to have you and your experience on here. One of the we were talking about, of course, the Zelensky interview on Sky News. It was 47 minutes. It was a wide-ranging discussion, a lot of interesting things. And before we get into the details of it, I wonder if you can kind of give me your impression of how you felt what he was saying lines up with his view that he's not going to give away any territory or he'll give it away for a while to get the hot phase over, but then he's going to get it back with diplomacy later. What is your impression of the whole interview?
Well, I saw only snippets, and I cannot tolerate him for more than 5 minutes, honestly, because I'm having after that a headache. I am not exactly spring chicken. I want to live my rest of my life well. But the point is that he's between the rock and the hard place. The rock is obviously the British who surround him armed. This is SAS, evidently some kind of the formation which guards him. And of course, he has a lot of orders taken from London and of course, Washington. On the hard place or the rock, whatever was first, is of course his Nazi formations, which whatever he does, he will be killed one way or another. He understands that he, for now, survives only because Russians need him. For whatever the purpose Russians need him, that's the totally different thing. But that is why he basically speaks in the Newspeak from 1984, two contradictory things simultaneously keeping in his mind, because he wants to live. Obviously, it's absolutely normal human actually instinct. And in this case, he's going to be going and speaking from the both sides of his mouth, but it doesn't change anything in terms of the strategic outcome of the whole special military operation. And now what we have, the larger conflagration by the combined West and Israel in terms of like Syria, Georgia, and maybe some other thing will happen in order to also refocus public attention from the catastrophe which happened for the NATO in Ukraine. And that is why not only Zelensky, you have people like Macron or Scholz saying self-contradictory things. I mean, they say one thing 1 minute, and the second minute after that, they say thing which is completely contradicts the other thing. And so as the result, you can sense desperation, and yeah, that's what we have.
Yeah, and I think that that desperation, while many in the West are going to try to paper over it or say, well, it doesn't matter. I think that from the Russian perspective, and even before I get into the next clip, I wonder if you can kind of talk about how this is viewed from the Russian side when they see what he says, regardless of what comes out of the other side of his mouth. Do they recognize that, the end is observed?
Yeah, in Russian, yeah, everybody knows that. I mean, every single tactical, operational, strategic parameter which defines basically the victories has been already met. It's just the matter of time, as I already stated, for example, to clean up the remnants of the armed forces of Ukraine and its NATO backers from the left shore or left bank of Dnieper. And after that, Russia faces the strategic dilemma, which is, of course, do we need to go and take the whole of Ukraine? Which in this particular case depends on the position of the West, whatever will be arranged. The Ukraine as it used to be is no more, and it's not going to exist. It's going to be most likely, including from the right bank of Dnipro, some kind of the protectorate. But this is just the matter of the, how to say it, preliminary planning. Today, the Kharkov area, went in flames again. And there are reports that Russians are advancing there. That means what? Yeah, we're looking at the strategic situation of obviously approaching Kharkov at least and cleaning up, especially when you look attentively what it happens to Kupiansk. And there is a semi-cauldron there at Kupiansk, which is very interesting. So yeah, left bank. After that, who knows? I don't know how it's going to proceed, because only President Putin, Security Council of Russia, and General Staff know how they want to approach it, what kind of the military political solution will be there. But the armed forces of Ukraine, their fifth iterations have been defeated. And what essentially it amounts to are mop-up operations, because obviously, when anybody looks at the terrain on the left bank, it is essentially one continuous village or town. It's just urban environment non-stop. And of course, because of that, you have to be very cautious how you approach the storming of those environments to preserve your personnel, while definitely trying to do what Russians were trying to do from the get-go, to preserve whoever civilians are left in those basically harmless villages and towns.
So let me ask you something related to the Russian intentions. What is it? I guess earlier in November, President Biden, first of all, authorizes the use of long-range weapons to be used. Then I think within 24 hours, both Storm Shadow and ATACMS were used. And in response, Russia said, no, I'm serious. We're lowering the threshold for nuclear use. And then they fired the Oreshnik. And then he says, no, I'm serious. If these continue on, there will be a response. Then there was another. Two more ATACMS missiles, attacks rather, were launched after that. And then Putin said, we're going to respond now. And then all of a sudden, the airspace over the Cosmodrome where the original Oreshnik was fired had been closed up until the 30th of November. At that point, Putin openly said, we're now considering targeting power ministries in Kiev, etc. And then nothing happened. There hadn't been any more ATACMS or Storm Shadow missiles, but then nothing happened from the Russian side either. The expectation was something was coming within that time frame, but it didn't. Do you have any view on what was going on behind the scenes?
The response was actually because everybody was so fixated on Oreshnik and the effect, and obviously visuals were stunning, but many people forgot that actually the hunt for the NATO core started on purpose now. Within the last week, if you look attentively at the reports of Russian Defense Ministry, and using, by the way, hypersonic weapons such as Kinzhal, and Kinzhal is a hypersonic weapon, and the results of the use of Kinzhal are devastating. So Russian Defense Ministry 2 days ago demonstrated how the command post, recessed and reinforced by concrete, have been absolutely demolished. And this was the command post of the group Donbass of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in April. It is an utter devastation. And now when you take a look at the list from the 25th of November, I presented it in one of my videos just recently, like 2 days ago. You're looking at dozens upon dozens high-ranking actually NATO officers, ranging from Americans to British to Polish to Germans and so on. So the response was there. And after that, yes, how many days now? Not a single attack of Storm Shadow or ATACMS. Evidently, that was the message, and evidently it was received. If they begin to launch again, well, then probably something going to happen to actually political power in Kyiv. But I think so. Russians are interested of keeping Zelensky so far alive. He obviously illegitimate president because obviously he is not elected anymore. He overstayed his power. But it's if you ask, why would you want Zelensky? Because the answer for Russians is very simple. He is so stupid and that, you know what, he does more harm to his country than we ever could. And now, obviously, he killed actually 2 generations of Ukrainian men. And so he will continue to kill them. And now we have the Washington, which is pressing Zelensky to lower the age to 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Will he go for that? He might.
Well, we're going to, in fact, we're going to talk about that very issue here shortly. But before I get into the Zelensky comments here, I want to look at, first of all, the current U.S. administration and the amount of time they have left now, 5 or so weeks, and then some of from the incoming Trump administration. And then we're going to get into Zelensky, because all of these things bear on what's happening now and how this war may be brought to an end. There was an interesting report in the New York Times recently that the United States was considering giving some of our nuclear weapons to Ukraine. And so on a television show here a couple of days ago, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked, is that true? Are we really thinking about that? Watch this.
The article said this, quote, several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. That would be an instant and enormous deterrent, but such a step would be complicated and have serious implications. Is that something that's under consideration, that the U.S. would return nuclear weapons to Ukraine? Is that something you're considering?
That is not under consideration. No, what we are doing is surging various conventional capacities to Ukraine so that they can effectively defend themselves and take the fight to the Russians, not nuclear capability.
Now, when I first heard that, I was on a television station where I was asking, and I just point blank said, that's ridiculous. Of course not. There's no chance we would ever do that. I mean, we have the nuclear weapons now, so if we wanted to use them, we could do that. But to hand them over to a desperate Zelensky with him having the trigger is absurd. We would never do that. But as Gary and I were talking before we went on, can we be sure that the White House wouldn't do that? This White House wouldn't go back on what it said? How do you view that?
Well, first, technically, it's impossible. Of course, the weapons which they took from Ukraine in 1991, actually, they do not exist anymore as the weapon system. So the only thing which United States can do, let's imagine this insane scenario. And again, I want to point out that I am on record that United States for the last few years is ungovernable country. That means you have different groupings within even the Biden administration, as was the case with, for example, the Trump administration, who are vying for power. And New York Times being tabloid, basically, they will just spread whatever they want, including, for example, the things which they simply invent on their own in their editorial stuff, because as I already stated, modern corporate media in the United States are tabloids. But technically, it's impossible. The only thing they can give is B-61 free-falling nuclear bomb, which will require the latest iterations of the either F-35 or F-16 block, whatever the hell those blocks, I already lost the count, which now, how is it possible? It's impossible, obviously. And the rest of it is so-called Typhoon, which is nothing more than Mk-41 vertical launch system, which is placed on the wheeled chassis, platform, and taken from the literally, it's the Mk-41 from the ships, U.S. Navy ships which carry it, and put it on the platform and load there, obviously, Tomahawk missiles with the nuclear-tipped Tomahawks. I know there are like 5 or 6 of them, those missile systems, and they are primarily right now located in the Southeast Asia. So technically, it's really impossible. And once any kind of the event of this nature happens, Ukraine will cease to exist, as will probably most of the bases, NATO bases, in Europe. Or U.S. bases in there.
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Who actually gave the authorization? It would be assumed it's ours, because it would be in all.
Exactly.
The only thing that troubles me is that there are, according to the New York Times anyway, there were actually senior administration officials who broached the subject, and that is so alarming to me that any rational thinking person would even think that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's face it. National security establishment in the combined West, not only United States. Obviously, we'll know United States runs the whole show. There are some chihuahuas like United Kingdom and others which pretend that they matter, and this French guys who still think that they are absolutely irresistible. But the point is, it's all about Washington, and there are a number of people there who are indeed, first, most of this circle is illiterate and incompetent militarily. They do not understand, or maybe understand too much, what is happening. And what is happening now, we have a completely different paradigm, of which I wrote in 2019. The book was called The Real Revolution in Military Affairs, where I explained that the way we view war today operationally, well, obviously tactically, inevitably, it's a completely different story. There's no book which was written on this yet. Well, it's being written now through the special military operation. And technically, the Washington security circle, so to speak, is not competent. It's like we spoke before the start of this podcast, like General Kellogg. He probably wouldn't understand tactical and operational implications when people explain to me what, for example, kinzhal is and what 3 kinzhals flying at you simultaneously mean, let alone 36 maneuvering hypersonic warheads by Oreshnik. You don't need nuclear weapons anymore. You really don't. I mean, you just can have the impact equaling in terms of the fire impact and in terms of the, political and tactical and operational impact, just conventionally. You don't need to really throw some kind of the 150 kiloton warhead at something. And this is the reason why NATO didn't release their Yuzhmash photos yet. There is a reason. They want to hide it. Russians obviously waiting when they will release it, and then Russians will release their photos. And, it's just the game, they're screwing each other brains. And that's the issue. We live in a different technological and different warfare paradigm. And
and in fact, I want to get into that because that's part of what's continuing on with the current administration. There has been reports out and now then completely validated that the Biden administration, back in May, the United States Congress finally passed a budget resolution which provided $61 billion for Ukraine. And then that has been coming out in increments over the time. But now there's still, I think, $6 to $8 billion that were left of that. So the Biden administration is saying, okay, since Trump is coming in here and he doesn't want that stuff to keep going, we're going to shove all of it out the door in a big surge, as fast as we can. In that same interview with Jake Sullivan, the interviewer asked him why. What was your intention?
What are you telling your Ukrainian counterparts about American support in 51 days after Biden leaves office?
Well, first, what I'm saying is we are going to do everything in our power for these 50 days to get Ukraine all the tools we possibly can to strengthen their position on the battlefield so that they'll be stronger at the negotiating table. And President Biden directed me to oversee a massive surge in the military equipment that we are delivering to Ukraine so that we have spent every dollar that Congress has appropriated to us by the time that President Biden leaves office.
And what will be the tactical impact if he succeeds and surges all $6 or $8 billion of that before January 20th? What is it going to matter on the ground in Ukraine?
None, zero. There will be some maybe really local tactical impact. The problem for Sullivan, and again, Sullivan is not competent man militarily, and I don't know who those generals in Pentagon who probably consult him. You cannot buy much for the $6 billion. You can provide, I read the latest list, they can get some missiles for whatever remaining Patriot Pack 3. And there will be no tanks, evidently. They do not want to humiliate Abrams as much as it's already have been humiliated on the battlefield, but they will try to provide, again, some missiles for remaining Patriots, some more ammo, whatever they can, how to say it, master, if you wish. And the point is, United States literally has nothing now to provide which really changes any outcome. They might try, or Zelensky asked it, it's absolutely useless for the specifics of the special military operation and modern hypersonic weapons, but they say, give us THAAD. United States has 7 THAAD batteries. Each of the batteries $1.25 billion. So as you may expect, you're not going to provide much, and it's going to be absolutely useless. It's going to be yet another, so to speak.
Well, 2 of them are already in Israel, so we're already down 2.
So yeah, I mean, down to 5. Yeah, it's just like, sure. So yeah, they're gonna grab those morsels, whatever they can master, and yeah, $6 billion doesn't buy much, and especially in terms of the combat effectiveness for the modern battlefield. And
here's an interesting thing about that. Initially, when that came across, and this was my first thought, I'll say, I heard that why is Biden surging all this stuff out the door when the American people elected Trump to end the war in part? That's one of the reasons why people voted for him, because he was outspoken, different from Harris, saying that he was going to end the war on one day, as he famously said. And so I thought this was going to complicate that, because there's no value militarily in surging something if you know the next guy coming in a few months is going to be trying to negotiate an end. But earlier today, just today, you mentioned General Kellogg a minute ago, who's the designated special envoy for Ukraine. He went on television in America here today, about an hour or so ago, and said something very different.
In a way, it's really pretty good for the president-elect, because it gives him leverage. He can make the decision of what he wants to do, and the more that the Biden administration does this, it creates a greater opportunity for the president-elect to do what he wants to do. And again, he understands leverage probably better than anybody based on his business experience. But, we go back to September when Zelensky came to Trump Tower, and he went up there, and then he and the president spoke, and they were talking about, after 1,000 days of war, they're signaling it's time for this war to end. Because the president said very clearly, and it's a quote, "It is time." And he's right about that. This war's gone on for over 1,000 days. It's expanded. It's now global in nature. When I mean global in nature, when you look at what's happened, you've got the North Koreans involved by providing troops, you've got the Iranians involved, you've got the Chinese involved, and you've got the Russians involved. So the makeup of the war has expanded, and it's time we kind of put it back in a box, not only for American security, but for global security as well. Yeah. So I don't have a problem with what they've done. It's all based on leverage. The president understands that, and he's going to use it to his advantage.
All based on leverage. What leverage would that provide an incoming Trump?
Well, first, I want to start with the thing which Alexander Bortnikov, the director of the FSB, stated 2 days ago, specifically on this issue. He said that we have the reasons to assume, this is not 100% proof, but it's a high probability theory that which everybody knows actually, that the Biden administration tries to do, well, to put some so to speak red flags for Trump and make sure that he will not have any other options but to continue with this. Well, obviously, when we look at Mr. Kellogg, and I by no means want to, say that his age somehow is a factor, but the guy is still living in 1980s. He is completely incompetent militarily, because any brigade level commander in the Russian army would laugh him out of the headquarters, because he doesn't even understand what he's talking about. He talks about this utter BS, which is called, of course, North Korean troops. So he still thinks that American weapons are that great, which they are not. I mean, they are absolutely a complete technological failure. And then, of course, what leverage is he talking about when basically, as I already stated in the beginning, all tactical, operational, strategic parameters are met for the military victory and achieving political objectives of the war. And political objectives of the war, which already happened, well, there will be the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. And guess, I know it sounds horribly grim, and it is horrible. I already mentioned it today. 2 generations of Ukrainian men have been completely wiped out. So what they have left now, 18 years old. And after that, there are no men to fight. And that's what, evidently, well, we have to go back This is the largest combined arms war since World War II in the European continent. And as Mr. Cavoli, Supreme Commander of the U.S. Army in Europe, U.S. forces in Europe, stated, scale, scale, scale. This is unbelievable in its scale. And General Kellogg obviously doesn't understand what is happening there. He also doesn't understand what are operational and strategic reserves of the Russian army. Russians have now, by different estimates, obviously I cannot say either, and nobody knows, obviously it's an exact number, up to 1 million people, trained, well-equipped troops in the rear, ready to go and do whatever will be needed depending on the contingency planning. So simple as that. And so what Mr. Kellogg says goes obviously completely contrary to what Mr. Trump was claiming, although I personally didn't take it seriously to start with, because you cannot stop that in 24 hours. You cannot stop that even in 24 days, because considering the scale and the political and geopolitical ramifications of all that. And so now you have this guy who, pardon my French, his experience in Vietnam doesn't apply there. And I am on record, and I can say to his face, he will be laughed out out of negotiating room with Russians, with the military and diplomats, because he will be looked at as the amateur who doesn't even understand what universe he is in.
Yeah.
But
And I actually want to look at another character in that play, another actor in this situation here, who's even more directly related to what kind of negotiations may come, and that is Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, as I said at the outset of the show, he just was interviewed by Sky News, and ostensibly he's talking about things that are going to result in him retaining a lot of his land, all of his independence, and ultimately all of his territory back, he says. But I want you to pay real attention to some of the things that he admits in the process of this, because I think in these 4 different clips we're about to see, I think he is maybe even subconsciously admitting he has no basis here to make any kind of negotiations and no leverage at all. Here's the first one where he's talking about what would happen if he loses international support.
Am I afraid? I'm afraid to lose the unity in the world. If we will lose this, I'm afraid we can lose everything.
Yes.
This is the most dangerous thing.
And do you believe that we're reaching that point, that you are losing unity with the world?
I'm not sure that we are very close to this, really. Mm-hmm. I think that more dangerous thing than just words of Putin, for example, words which he uses to escalate everything, that even these words, even after the full-scale invasion, after these years, even after all the things, when Ukraine showed that it can stay and it can fight against all his imperial narratives, even after that, sometimes when he speaks about something, some leaders in the world are afraid. When they're afraid, they begin to communicate with their societies. When they begin to communicate with their societies, they divide their societies.
So basically what Zelensky's saying is the real problem isn't losing support from the West because of battlefield situation. It's because Putin is saying stuff that's making them want to go based on what Putin is saying. But what say you about how much it's actually what Putin is doing on the battlefield?
Yeah, first we need to consider the fact that the only thing what is left for Zelensky are platitudes, primarily political platitudes, because he doesn't have much to show militarily, because his military, or whatever is remaining of the armed forces of Ukraine, and we now see the fragmentation, actual fragmentation of the front. As somebody wrote in the comment, he has no cards to play. So the only thing which he has left is to say such, harebrained constructs like what Putin says. Well, Putin doesn't say much. Russia already established very well the intentions. And that's also established really well the fact that there will be no freezing of the conflict. There will be none. But for some reason, the combined West, primarily through the corporate media, and people like Zelensky, who actually is a fairy tale writer primarily. He have been basically supplying the combined West and Washington with fairy tales, and I have all justifications to say that, including that very many in U.S. military swallowed those fairy tales hook, line, and sinker. And then suddenly, when you cannot deny the reality on the ground, and what are you going to do? You're going to go for the platitudes, blaming on what Vladimir Putin says, or speaking about what all kinds of the unity and things like that. While in reality, latest polls by none other than Ukrainian polling agencies. If you need to, I can send you the. Actually, I believe RT also reported on that, but it is all over the place. Ukrainians, 16% of support. 16. The war, the special military operation begins to bite. They don't have light. They don't have heat often. There's a lot of things which are happening there, and the society begins to notice big time. And now you have constantly the stream of the killed and maimed people from the front. Most who are basically, I'll give you the reminder why, for example, in World War I, the prostitutes in Paris who had syphilis charged more than the healthy prostitutes. Very simple. The soldiers wanted to get infected because at that time the syphilis infected soldier have been removed from the front. We have pretty much same situation, up to the point that some people are actually going into the therapy. They to change their their gender. Nobody wants to go and fight. That is why if you look attentively at the documentary evidence, it is essentially nothing more than the sweep operations by Gestapo. They grab people from the street. We saw people of my age, or people even higher age, 70, being taken. Now, those 18-year-old kids are not safe either. So until, well, you have to understand, Lindsey Graham stated that we need to fight to the last Ukrainian. My God. That's what is
easy
happening.
for him to say, especially when it's not his family. One of the other things he was talking about that he actually, for one of the first times ever, said, yeah, we're going to have to enter into diplomacy and negotiations. But then when he actually explains what he means by the negotiation, it takes kind of a strange turn.
He respects only the power. And you have to be very strong. And Ukraine has to be very strong in any future kind of negotiations. When we speak, a lot of journalists and a lot of political leaders, they speak. So what kind of negotiations can be? Not what circumstances. Mm-hmm. First of all, circumstances in which Ukraine is strong. Mm-hmm. And after that, doesn't matter what city, what country, what we will speak about, mm-hmm. with whom of leaders, and etc. Mm-hmm. We have to be at the same level. It's minimum, really. We have to be stronger than him. Mm-hmm. But we have to be very strong, if even at the same level, with unity of the partners. And they have to talk with us one voice policy, not other way, one voice policy. If we speak with Putin, so with a plan, not to give him chance to give us ultimatum. Mm-hmm. He can't give us ultimatum because he's a killer and he's a terrorist and he's alone, really alone.
So Vladimir Putin is not allowed to give an ultimatum because he is alone. And that Ukraine has to be more powerful than Russia to get into the negotiation. That's delusional from every angle. I mean, how do you even address that?
Oh, very simple. It doesn't matter what he says, because obviously he's trying to pretend that if somehow West, which is impossible now, provide him with some new technologies or something like that, which are not there, they don't exist. Somehow it will be strong Ukraine. He needs somebody to support him at this stage because he is beginning to be, he is already isolated in the political field in Ukraine. But the point is, he needs to understand, I think so he understands it. It's not about Ukraine. First, there will be no freezing. there will be some kind of negotiations. Let Kellogg come to Moscow and pretend that he has anything to offer. The combined West has nothing to offer, and it is not between Russia and Ukraine. It is between Russia and NATO, period. Ukraine is a virtual state with demolished armed forces. It's not the force which it was even in the beginning of the 2022, which at that time was indeed the strongest European army. It was strongest NATO army. It was stronger than Turkey. Well, we know the result. And so now it is about, and again, it's Moscow and Washington, period. These are the two deciders. It's just a matter of how Washington wants to arrange and save its own face. But in this case, you will have to have much more serious people than Kellogg, talking to Russians.
Yeah, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen if General Kellogg, after January 20th, is sent to Moscow or even some neutral place or whatever, and he sits opposite his Russian counterpart, and he starts trying to say stuff about negotiation? I mean, how are those talks going to go?
They're probably going to stop at that. There pretty fast, or he will be laughed at, or he will be given, he have to pray not to meet obviously people like Lavrov or Gerasimov. So because obviously he will be like, who the hell is this? Who the hell are you? So this is exactly what it is. The people do not understand.
And specifically, let's say it's Lavrov and or Gerasimov in the meeting at the same time, and it's with Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, sitting next to. Work with me here, sitting next to General Kellogg, right? So you have those two on two sitting here, and they come in and say, all right, listen, like Sebastian Gorka said, either we freeze the current line where it's at right here, or all the support that we've given Ukraine so far will be like peanuts, and we'll keep giving them more. What is the Russian side going to say to that?
They will laugh, and they pray to God that Lavrov not using, he's very good at it, sternest Russian profanity, and he periodically does it, so he's known to that. So Gerasimov will laugh. I mean, listen, General Staff of Russia and what used to be GRU, now it is GU. For some reason, they still cannot return it to what it was, main intelligence directorate. They're extremely good at strategic analysis and forecasting, and they're not morons. There are very many good people there who understand economic, industrial capabilities of the United States. Europe is not even the player here. They can provide maybe another 20 tanks and maybe 20 cruise missiles. Now, United States cannot provide anything, unless, of course, it goes into the untouchable now stocks, which are already low. And we already hear it from every pretty much, corner of the United States alternative media, including your friend Doug McGregor, and that we're low. We have nothing left, essentially. Yeah, that's what it is. And again, when you take a look at for example, you have 7 thoughts. Okay, sure, send them in. What else? There's nothing else to send. That's the funny thing.
And so what's going to make that negotiation even worse for our side is, and Gary, I'm going to skip to the fourth one here. We've already covered the third one. He's talking about the manpower issue. As we've been saying on this channel from the outset, it's about men. It's not about machines or money, ultimately, while those are necessary. If you don't have the manpower, it doesn't matter how much stuff you have. And in the comments the debate you discussed earlier about the possibility of lowering the draft age to 18 and taking another generation of Ukrainian men to throw into slaughter, the interviewer asked Zelensky how he's going to manage the manpower issue.
So they speak about mobilization, but the real problem with 10 brigades, which our partners didn't equip. I asked them very much, more than 1 year ago, that we need to equip these brigades. We made this solution with United States and with European allies, and for today, totally Europe and the United States, totally now equipping 2.5 brigades.
Okay.
For today.
So have they abandoned you then? Why aren't they giving you more weapons?
I don't know. I mean, this is their decision. There are some bureaucracy, some decisions, some they don't think that this is the priority, and etc. It's always the same way during this war.
Okay, he said that he has been trying to get this stuff for over a year. But in May, we gave $61 billion. Germany just gave a whole bunch here. And yet he's admitting we don't even have enough stuff to equip our troops right now. 7 brigades, apparently, he has manned, but no equipment. And it's not coming from anywhere. You just touched on this a second ago. And Gary, if I could get you to bring up a headline I saw you bring up earlier in this show, I think you said an hour ago from BBC. It says that Zelensky and his folks are telling their troops to hang on until Trump comes in. Just hang on a little longer. But hang on with what and for what? Can you tell me as best you can, what rationale would anyone say to the Ukraine troops keep fighting and dying in large numbers between now and January 20th so that they can negotiate an end to the war?
No, it has nothing to do with the negotiation and the end to the war. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and of course, we kind of know each other through our conversations. We watch each other and all that. And people like Doug McGregor, these are competent military people. And this operational level of Pentagon, all those colonels, and brigadier generals who actually deal with the actual numbers and all that, they know what is going on. So the point is that no matter what they do, it's laughable. What is 10 brigades? Within the first months of the so-called Kursk adventurism, they lost 14 brigades there. And now when you look at Kursk alone, and they use their primarily, well, that's the only thing they have left, Western equipment. There are Challengers, there are Abrams, Burning Leopard, and all that kind of stuff. We're looking at 2 days ago, not yesterday, 2 days ago, was 36,000 killed of armed forces of Ukraine. So you can multiply it by 2 because that's what the number of the sanitary losses you're talking about. So they killed there in Kursk alone, and it continues, the slaughter continues, the whole combined arms army. They basically killed 2 army corps. And if they want to continue with that, sure. Russians have their true kill ratio is horrifying in some localities. And if you looked at today at the videos, at the video evidence, and there are plenty of them from Kursk, the state at which whatever the remnants of the armed forces of Ukraine there is horrific. There are wounds which are not treated. They literally rot in their dugouts and whatever, which are still not, basically killed by Russians. And it's well-known fact, they have barrier troops. So if you want to try to surrender, you will be shot immediately. Moreover, if you are pushed towards those what is called mid-storms, because if you go in, you're dead. And if you come back, guess what? Even if you are slightly wounded, you are basically brought back into whatever the units or subunits are ready to go again. So basically, it's not the army anymore. It's kind of concentration camp. And their morale obviously is low. And the only thing they do there is primarily, not all, but there are still some units remaining, especially fanatical Nazis. But primarily, this is a horrible thing. And when they get taken by Russians to POWs, they're so brainwashed that they think they will be executed, and then suddenly they get medical attention. They are fed properly. They have a place to sleep and things like that. So, and when you look at these armed forces, my gosh, it's over.
And you see Gary showing on there, you have reportedly over 100,000 have deserted. And
160, they say,
could be even higher.
160 deserved. So it's unbelievable. And those who were able to desert, others have been killed. There are many more people who try to get the hell out of there. You can't. You literally have Nazi formation standing there in the rear, and they shoot you.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Given those realities that you just laid out there about the people deserting, the very low capability of those that actually are in uniform, the insufficient amount of kit, insufficient amount of ammunition, whatever, and then just all the categories on the Russian side, which are all just continuing to escalate in all those areas. Now let's go back to the conversation, the theoretical conversation I talked about with Secretary of State, Sebastian Gorka, maybe General Kellogg sitting opposite Lavrov and Gerasimov. So you told me that once the U.S. side makes their declarations, that they would be laughed at. But then after the laughter stops, what is the Russian side going to tell the American delegation that their negotiating position is?
They will pull out December 2021 letter of the foreign ministry, while in reality is the letter from, approved by the president and Security Council about demands for the shared security in Europe. It's not about Ukraine. It's about Europe, and it's about NATO in general. And that declaration is all there. Everybody saw it. The demands there are very well formulated, and that's our demands. See what you can, fulfill. What you cannot fulfill, we'll talk about that. But it's better be that most of them will be fulfilled, and they will tell where they can have some, not leverage, some negotiation position, but most of it will be it is going to be dictation of the articles of capitulation, pretty much. And as I already stated, we have we have to keep in mind there's 1 million troops in the rear ready to do So
now, as of this past June 14th, I think, President Putin said, all right, here are my basically last chance negotiations. This is before the Ukraine side launched into the Kursk area. He said that basically it was the 4 provinces, all of them, and that the Ukraine side would have to evacuate the remainder of Zaporizhia and the other province in the south. I can't think of it right offhand.
Kherson.
Yeah. And of course, no NATO and all that. But is that what they're going to be talking about now? Because he said after August, when the Ukraine side made the incursion into Kursk, that now that deal is off the table. So the question is, what do you think, anyway, is the territorial bottom line for Russia that the list still talk about?
Left bank of Dnipro.
So now it's even more than it would have been in June, in your view.
Dnipro, yeah, left bank of Dnipro should be cleared up. And then whatever will be left will be essentially protectorate of Russia. I mean, it will be given some kind of the police force. He was talking about those Istanbul negotiations as the framework for talking about it. And the key phrase, which most of the U.S. media and U.S. pundits, for some reason, decide to always forgo or forget to talk about. And this phrase is considering realities on the ground. Realities on the ground are such that Russians are deciding, do we have to take all to the left bank of Dnipro? Because Russians are still operating in their what is called the personnel safe mode. So they do not want to kill their own troops, which is absolutely normal intention for any kind of the real military leader. And that is why there are all those big red arrows offensive. They could happen if need be. It depends. When you have the escalation dominance of such basically scale, it's very easy to present the purely military arguments in any kind of the diplomatic or what have you negotiations. And yeah, that is why you need the good professionals on the other side who come in and they understand what is being shown to them. If not, well, then, the procedure continues, so to speak, the work in progress. So
here's what Putin said on June 14th. Tell me what you think is different about now, or would this be a good entry point?
No, it's not anymore. No.
The essence of our proposal is not some kind of temporary truce or suspension of fire, as, for example, the West wants. This is not about freezing the conflict, but about its final completion. And I will say again, as soon as Kiev agrees to a similar course of events proposed today, agrees to the complete withdrawal of its troops from the DPR and LPR in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, and really begins this process, we are ready to begin negotiations without delaying them. I repeat, this is our principled position. Neutral, non-aligned, nuclear-free status of Ukraine, its demilitarization and denazification.
And now then you say the difference is what?
The difference, it was Kursk, obviously. And after that, both Putin and Medvedev Dmitry, the alter ego of Mr. Putin, the deputy chair of the Russia Security Council, said the deal is off. This thing is not valid anymore. And that's the thing. It's ambiguity. How much further Russia wants to go. Judging by the situation in the Kharkov operational axis right now, Kharkov definitely is some kind of the target now, objective. I don't know. Maybe it's not. It's difficult to judge it when you have such a limited information. But what I'm saying, it's the left bank most likely. The whole left bank.
Answer me this. Militarily speaking, again, we're still in that negotiation with all those players I just mentioned, and the Trump team comes in and says, "Here's what we want: freeze along the current lines." He gets laughed out. Whatever the Russians say, no. So they go back to Washington. They don't have anything in their hand. Is Russia's position that then they'll just say, okay, we're not going to talk about any of the stuff you want. We'll simply keep going on with the operations until we take physically on the ground. Is that what would follow next?
That's the possibility. That's the certain contingency. That's the possibility. How probable it is, I don't know. I really do not want to.
What are the alternatives? Other than that, what else might Russia do?
Well, that's pretty much it. That's what you need to do. You know, the more they pretend that they control the situation in Washington, the more of Ukraine Russia will take.
So you're an American citizen now. So how do you think that this would play in the United States? And what do you think the Trump administration might do if they go in there with all this braggadocious stuff that these guys like Sebastian Gorka and Kellogg have been talking with a lot of confidence, but all of a sudden Trump goes in there and however good of a negotiator he is, he's got a weak hand that he's going to be handed over by the current administration. So I don't know how you negotiate from a position of weakness to get anything good. But I mean, at some point, the administration would be faced with conceding to what the reality is on the ground, which won't be politically well received in the United States.
Well, the only saving grace for Trump, apart from his obviously, pathos-ridden declarations, is the fact that he can say it wasn't my war, it was the previous administration's war, and you know what, I did all I could. Sorry, guys. It is what it is. That's one of the ways he probably can go. But knowing Trump and now seeing who he appointed in this national security circle, not much United States can do, really. I mean, if we're talking about it, they want to accelerate the nuclear threshold. Well, good luck with that. But other than that, nothing. That's the whole point. It's the kind of fait accompli. You begin to look at the brick wall and nothing you can do. And how they will play politically, this difficult for me to say. But obviously, neither Kellogg nor this clown Gorka, they are any players in any way. They are totally incompetent people, which, as you correctly stated, it's a very weak hand. That's completely different paradigm for the United States in the last 30 years.
Yeah,
it's completely. They never used to it because they talked themselves so much up that they believed in their own, omnipotent United States, which it never was. There was some success of beating the crap out of this Saddam's army, so-called army. But other than that, if you take a look at it, I mean, there was mostly, Kellogg was in the war which was lost, and we now have Afghanistan and things like that. I remember Trump figured it out. Oh, you should have left Afghanistan like this. Dude, I mean, did you read like 2006 Washington Post revelations? I mean, about what American generals were lying about Afghanistan, which is known as the Afghanistan files by Washington Post. Even the Washington Post went there. Yeah. But you have to prove to people, well, you cannot prove to them. You have to put them in front of the fact. Yeah. And if this fact is ongoing locomotive, so it is what it is. Nothing could be done about it.
In the last few minutes we have here, what is the possibility that if the West just continues to reject any of the proposals that the Russian side has, and that they're not willing to give the Russians their minimal requirements, and the offensive continues on, to what extent would Kiev eventually be at risk of being attacked? And does Russia even have the manpower to actually take the Kiev city if it came to it?
Russians will not take Kiev in a classic manner. First, architectural part of it. And secondly, Russia does have manpower. By why? Obviously, nobody wants that horrendous civilian and military losses, which will be incurred, trying to take it. You don't have to do it. You can actually basically surround it and cut off the supply lines. And then things will happen practically on their own. So that's what might happen. But you probably already know that Rada, another illegitimate political instrument, which is the Ukrainian parliament, they do not want even to gather together anymore because they are afraid that something like, you don't need to have a Oreshnik, really. Kinzhal will do the job as fine, if you need to, for example, to kill the whole Rada. Russians will not do that. They need this bunch of the creeps, basically, kill each other, and that is where we're getting to. And as I already stated in the beginning, Zelensky knows his life depends on what Washington and London will decide. Once he is not needed, he will be offed by his security detail, which is SAS.
Wow, that's not an enviable position, but it's not an enviable position for anyone right now. And this, the faster this war can get over, the better it is for literally everyone. And I pray that the Trump administration, whatever it takes, does what it was needed to get this war over.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all these great views with us. We really do appreciate it. Again, go to Smoothie X12. And to get more, I guess you can get some cigar stuff there if you want to figure out what's happening. That's a good one to go to. But thank you very much for coming on. Really,
my pleasure, Colonel. Always my pleasure.
And always same to ours as well. And thank you very much for joining us today. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. It works out more than you think. Also, for some of our new, we've gone over 100,000 here, and we've got a lot of new folks here. Some of you may not know we're actually on podcasts now as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, everywhere you get your podcast, type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you'll find us there waiting for you. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.